testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly.
Good morning, and welcome to Sports Center. Today we have a Puritan analyst calling in about a very peculiar story involving a minister wearing a black veil. The minister's name is Mr. Hooper, and he is from Milford, New England. Now to our analyst. Why is the black veil important?
Black can symbolize evil, mystery, and oppression, so Mr. Hooper is really making a statement about how he views himself and the rest of humanity. He's saying we're all covered in evil and mystery, and we try to keep it a secret, and the secrets are oppressing us.
Is Mr. Hooper the first minister to wear a symbolic black veil?
No, there was a clergyman, Joseph Moody, from Maine. His veil represented the shame and remorse with which he became burdened after accidentally killing a beloved friend.
Do you think that's related to Mr. Hooper's black veil?
I believe this is where Mr. Hooper got the idea of a black veil, but I don't think that the veil represents the same thing. Mr. Hooper is trying to get people to admit to their secret sin by admitting to his. Joseph Moody, however, was ashamed that his actions somehow led to the death of his friend.
How is the veil affecting Mr. Hooper psychologically?
Well, Mr. Hooper has been known to be frightened by his own reflection, so obviously the sight of his veil greatly troubles him. He's also been known to sport a melancholy smile. Now, that can mean a couple of things. One, he feels superior because he knows the meaning of the black veil and no one else does. Two, despite the sin he seems to have committed, the veil separating him from the good of the world, the fact that no one seems to understand his message, and the fact that the people of his town are terrified of him, he is glad that people still respect him, and in fact his people seem to have a greater respect for him than they did before the black veil, and he is more able to lead them to the path to heaven. Mr. Hooper obviously sees great meaning in the fact that he alone has the veil, and it does seem to distress him. His outburst upon his deathbed, where he explained the meaning behind his veil, testifies to that.
What did Mr. Hooper say the veil represented?
Mr. Hooper claimed that the veil represented the acknowledgement of his own secret sin. He said that everyone wears a figurative black veil, and they all try desperately to conceal it, and judge people who do show it, or some of it. So he basically said that appearance is just a show, and that everyone has sinned, whether secretly or not, and he is trying to get people to show people that they should confess.
What are the major themes in the story?
Secret sin and judgment are obvious themes, apparent throughout the entire story. Judgment is delivered by the congregation on the morning that Mr. Hooper first debuted his black veil and all throughout Mr. Hooper's life, ceasing only after Hooper explains the purpose of the veil and dies. Secret sin is referenced in the sermon that Mr. Hooper made during his talk with his fiancée Elizabeth, and again during his deathbed outburst. Isolation, a less apparent theme, is displayed through the outcast status instilled upon him by his congregation. This status manifests as the fact that he wasn't invited to old Squire Sanders' table, his lonely walks, Elizabeth abandoning him, and being the sole bearer of the black veil.
The story has been described as a dark romantic story. Can you explain how?
Dark romantic stories tend to feature plenty of symbols and human actions, such as the symbolism behind Mr. Hooper wearing a black veil and Elizabeth's abandonment of him. They also deal with original sin. Mr. Hooper said that everyone wears a black veil, not just adults or overly judgmental people or even sinners. They also deal with the innate depravity of people, which relates to who wears the black veils, the theme of isolation, the psychological effects of sin, how the veil affects Mr. Hooper and his congregation, and the horror of evil, which is what scares Mr. Hooper and the little boy that imitates him. All these characteristics are found throughout the story, making it a dark romantic story.
What are words that repeat throughout the story, and is there any significance to them?
The word black repeats most often throughout the story, and its meaning already has significance as a symbol. Its repetition also has significance because when black is added to a story so many times, it makes the story darker. It made it darkly mysterious and tinged it with evil. It also made the setting darker, so the people of Milford seemed more downtrodden than they had before Mr. Hooper started wearing his black veil, which adds to the story's coverage of the psychological effects of evil.
One last question. Is there any meaning behind the names of the people involved here?
Well, obviously the most significant person in the story is Mr. Hooper. His name means barrel maker, which symbolizes how he came to encircle his congregation and keep them together and faithful to God. Elizabeth's name also has a significant meaning, God's promise, which makes it ironic that she does not agree to marry Mr. Hooper, but is fitting in the fact that she is always by his side.
That was very informative, Danny. Thank you for your time.
You stay classy, Planet Earth. Now to our field reporter, Champ Khan.
And now, a troubled young bride who is disturbed by the minister's presence at the ceremony. Congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you.
Miss, could you take a few moments to tell us about your ceremony and what happened this morning?
Of course, Mr. Hooper is usually somewhat cheerful at events like this, especially when he is the one performing the ceremony, but the black veil that hung gloomily over his face cast a dark shadow on the entire event. As we stood before him, I could feel my body go cold and my skin turn pale as my hands trembled. His very presence and that horrible veil turned my blood to ice. The awful piece of crepe was the only thing the guests saw. It was the one thing for him to wear it to the funeral earlier this evening, but to a wedding, if there were any other matrimony as forlorn as this, I would be very surprised.
Was there anything else unusual about Mr. Hooper that you noticed?
Yes, actually I do recall something strange. When Mr. Hooper took a glass of wine at the end of the ceremony to congratulate us, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass. At that moment, he shuddered, just as the corpse at the funeral earlier had, and he spilled the wine onto the floor. It was as if he were seeing the veil for the first time and was horror-stricken, as we all had been. It does seem odd that he would be so surprised by his own appearance, though.
Thank you for your time and congratulations again. As you can see, the town of Milford is absolutely buzzing with the curiosity, fear, and confusion about the mysterious veil of the minister, Mr. Hooper. That's all the time we have today. Stay tuned. Up next is the Colbert Report.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a very special guest with us, Father Hooper of Milford, the man who can only be compared to the Lady Gaga of his time.
Thank you for having me, Stephen. However, I'd appreciate it if you never compare me to that dreadful woman again.
I wanted you to be on my show ever since I heard of the rancor you've been causing in Milford and the surrounding areas.
I'd be happy to indulge you. What would you like to know?
Well, first off, I think we're all dying to know what drove you to incorporate that god-awful piece of clothing into your wardrobe.
To put it simply, I know not everyone has a full grasp of my religion. I chose the veil to show the mysteries everyone hides throughout their lives. This is why I believe the veil holds so much power over people, even myself.
Talk about a power trip. That being said, how did this affect your life personally?
It's a sore topic, but I'll answer as well as I can. My life was drastically changed. For better or worse, I cannot answer. But I believe in my heart that I made a difference to the people of Milford. I had to sacrifice many things, such as love, friendship, and acceptance. But given the choice, I would choose the same path again.
Well, you, my friend, are one iron-willed person. But come on, really, you didn't think your point got across after a month or two. A life of solitude must have sucked.
To be fair, it was more of a punishment set upon myself. But I see where you're coming from.
I don't want to hold you up for much longer, but I do have one last question. Why on earth would you continue to fight for your point, even in the face of death?
Really? That's your last question? I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory, but I will give you an explanation. I chose to keep true to my goal, even in death, to prove that your choices in life never just go away. They follow you, even into the afterlife. They're concrete.
Well, thank you for being with us and making me slightly less eager to continue with my life. I hope you continue to get your point across, but next time, don't you think a quick memo would suffice instead of the creepy veil?
Live from New York. It's Saturday night!
Now, Weekend Update with Jake and Liana. Hi, welcome to Weekend Update. I'm Jake Schlesinger.
And I'm Liana Abramson. In the small town of Milford in New England, the local minister, Mr. Hooper, has donned a black veil over his face and won't take it off or tell anyone why he's wearing it, proving that even ministers go through that emo stage.
Here to comment on the matter is the minister's ex-fiancée, Elizabeth.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Elizabeth, you were engaged to Mr. Hooper for quite some time and knew him pretty well. When did you start to see some changes in his behavior?
Well, everything was normal until one day he brought home some pretty angsty music, some Slipknot and My Chemical Romance, and he would play the music obnoxiously loud and always kept the door closed. He even put a sign on his door that said, "Hooper's Room, no conformists allowed." I would ask him to turn the music down and he would say stuff like, "I hate you, you're not my real mom," or "You're just part of the corporations, man." And then finally he came home and with that veil upon his face, and I just had enough, so I left him.
So it sounds to me like your fiancé is every teenager in America.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So do you think there was any symbolism to the black veil? It couldn't have been all teenage angst.
Well, Hooper was a very religious man, very devoted to God. And you could argue that the veil represented secret sin, or original sin, or something that he did in his past. Or maybe it was a way to silently insult the rest of the townspeople for not being as orthodox as him.
That's pretty deep. But what do you think the veil really represented?
Oh, I just think he was being moody because I told him to turn his music down.
Thank you very much for joining us, Elizabeth. For Weekend Update, I'm Liana Abramson.
And I'm Jake Schlesinger. Good night.